I never thought I'd be the type of person to run away from my problems. But there I was, staring at the "Welcome to Millbrook" sign through my rain-streaked windshield, wondering how my life had spiraled so completely out of control in just 48 hours. 2 days ago, I was Charlotte Reed, successful marketing executive at one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms. I had the corner office, the designer wardrobe, and what I thought was the perfect relationship with Marcus, my colleague and boyfriend of 3 years. We were the power couple everyone envied until I walked into his office to surprise him with lunch and found him bent over his desk with our intern, Jessica. The worst part wasn't catching him cheating. It was the look on his face when he saw me. Not shame, not regret, but pure annoyance. Like I was interrupting something important. "Charlotte, we need to talk," he'd said, straightening his tie while Jessica scrambled to collect her scattered clothes. But I was already gone, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked out of that office, out of that building, and apparently, out of my entire life. My grandmother's cottage in Millbrook had been sitting empty for 6 months since she passed. I'd inherited it along with a modest sum of money, but I'd never imagined I'd actually need to use it as my refuge. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same inheritance I'd planned to sell to fund my dream vacation to Europe was now my lifeline. The gravel driveway crunched under my BMW's tires as I pulled up to the small white cottage with its wraparound porch and overgrown garden. Everything about this place screamed the opposite of my carefully curated Manhattan existence, where my apartment was all clean lines and neutral colors. This cottage was pure chaos, wildflowers climbing the fence, wind chimes hanging from every available surface, and a bright red front door that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades. I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes, engine running, air conditioning blasting, debating whether to turn around and drive back to the city. But where would I go? My apartment was in both our names. My job would be unbearable with Marcus there every day, probably flaunting his newfound freedom. And my so-called friends? They were really our friends, and I had a sinking feeling about whose side they'd choose. The decision was made for me when my phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen, and something inside me snapped. I turned off the engine, grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, and marched up to that red door without looking back. The cottage smelled like lavender and old memories. Every surface was covered with my grandmother's doilies, her collection of ceramic cats staring at me from various shelves like tiny, judgmental observers. I dropped my suitcase in the middle of the living room and immediately burst into tears, the kind of ugly, heaving sobs that I hadn't allowed myself since I was 12 years old. That's when I heard the knocking. I tried to compose myself, wiping my face with the back of my hand and smoothing down my hair. But when I opened the door, I knew I looked like a disaster. Standing on my porch was quite possibly the most beautiful man I'd ever seen outside of a magazine cover. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and the kind of warm brown eyes that seemed to see straight through me. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl that made my knees feel weak. "I'm Dr. James Morrison from next door. I saw the car and wanted to make sure everything was okay. Mrs. Henderson, your grandmother? She always told me to keep an eye on the place." I opened my mouth to speak and nothing came out. This gorgeous man was my neighbor? In Millbrook. Population 2,847. The universe had to be playing some kind of cosmic joke. I'm Charlotte, I managed finally. Charlotte Reed, I was her granddaughter. Was. His eyebrows furrowed with concern. I am. She passed away 6 months ago. I'm staying here for a while. He nodded slowly, his gaze taking in my tear-stained face and wrinkled business suit. I'm sorry for your loss. Mrs. Henderson was a wonderful woman. She talked about you all the time. Her granddaughter in the big city with the important job. The way he said important job made me cringe. Had my grandmother been bragging about my career to the neighbors? And now here I was, unemployed and homeless, hiding out in her cottage like a complete failure. Thank you, I said quietly. I should probably get settled in. Of course, he said, but he didn't move from the porch. Listen, I know this might sound forward, but if you need anything, groceries, directions, someone to show you where the good coffee is, I'm right next door. The blue house with the veterinary clinic attached. A veterinarian? Of course he was. Probably spent his days saving adorable puppies and caring for injured wildlife. Meanwhile, my biggest accomplishment this week was successfully manipulating people into buying overpriced skincare products they didn't need. That's very kind, I said, already planning to avoid him at all costs. The last thing I needed was to develop a crush on my neighbor when my life was in complete shambles. He smiled then, and I swear the entire world got a little brighter. Welcome to Millbrook, Charlotte Reed. I think you're going to like it here. As I watched him walk back to his house, I couldn't help but notice the way his jeans fit just right, and how he moved with the kind of easy confidence that only came from being completely comfortable in your own skin. It was the exact opposite of Marcus, who calculated every gesture for maximum impact. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing for the first time in months. Maybe this small-town exile wouldn't be so bad after all. But then I remembered the state of my life, the mess I'd left behind, and the fact that I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do next. Getting involved with anyone right now would be a disaster, especially someone as clearly perfect as Dr. James Morrison. I spent the rest of the day unpacking and trying to make the cottage feel less like a museum and more like a temporary home. My grandmother had kept everything exactly the way it was when my grandfather was alive, which meant the decor hadn't been updated since 1987. But there was something oddly comforting about the floral wallpaper and crocheted throw pillows. It felt like being wrapped in a warm hug. By evening, I was starving and there wasn't a single edible thing in the kitchen. The nearest grocery store was a 20-minute drive, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face the curious stares of small-town locals just yet. That's when I noticed the light on in James's clinic next door. I stood at my kitchen window, watching as he moved around what looked like an examination room. Even from this distance, I could see he was treating some kind of large dog. The way he moved was gentle but confident, his hands sure and steady as he worked. There was something mesmerizing about watching someone who was truly good at their job, who genuinely cared about what they were doing. My stomach growled loudly, reminding me of my more pressing concerns. I was just about to resign myself to a dinner of stale crackers when I heard a car pulling into my driveway. Through the front window, I saw James getting out of his truck, carrying what looked like a covered dish. My heart did this weird fluttering thing that I definitely didn't have time for. "I hope you don't mind," he said when I opened the door. My Aunt Martha lives down the street, and when she heard Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter was staying here, she insisted I bring you some of her famous chicken casserole. It's kind of a Millbrook tradition. We take care of our neighbors. The smell wafting from the dish was absolutely heavenly. "That's incredibly thoughtful," I said, accepting the warm casserole. "But you really didn't need to. Trust me. Refusing Martha's cooking is not an option in this town," he said with a grin. "She'd probably show up here herself if I came back with a full dish." We stood there for a moment, the silence stretching between us. I wanted to invite him in, but that felt too dangerous. I also wanted to slam the door in his face before I did something stupid, like develop feelings for my impossibly perfect neighbor. "Well," I said finally, "thank you again, and please thank your aunt for me." "I will." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Charlotte, I know we just met, but if you ever want to talk about your grandmother, or the town, or anything really, I'm a pretty good listener. I know how hard it can be to start over in a new place." Something in his voice made me look at him more closely. There was a story there, some kind of pain or understanding that went deeper than simple neighborly concern. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you know." After he left, I ate Martha's incredible casserole and tried not to think about how long it had been since someone had shown me such simple, genuine kindness. In New York, every interaction felt transactional. What could you do for me? What could I do for you? How could we mutually benefit each other? But James had brought me dinner simply because I was his neighbor, because his aunt thought it was the right thing to do. I was finishing the last bite when my phone rang. Marcus again. I'd been ignoring his calls all day, but the fourth attempt finally wore down my resolve. "What do you want?" I answered. "Charlie." "Thank God," he said, using the nickname I'd once found endearing but now made my skin crawl. "Where are you? We need to talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk rationally about you sleeping with Jessica on your desk? Look, that was a mistake, okay? I was stressed about the Morrison account, and she was there, and it just happened. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything. Marcus, it means you're exactly the kind of person I thought you weren't. Don't be dramatic. We can work through this. We're good together. Charlie, we make sense." We made sense. That was exactly the problem. Our entire relationship had been based on making sense. Two successful people who looked good together, who advanced each other's careers, who fit into each other's 5-year plans. There had never been any real passion, any genuine connection, any of the messy, complicated feelings that actually mattered. "We're done. Marcus," I said quietly. "Don't call me again. You can't just throw away 3 years because of one mistake." "I'm not throwing away 3 years. I'm saving myself from wasting any more time on someone who thinks cheating is just a mistake caused by stress. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Then I poured myself a glass of my grandmother's wine and sat on the porch swing, watching the stars come out over Millbrook. In Manhattan, you could barely see the stars through all the light pollution. Here, they filled the entire sky like scattered diamonds. From next door, I could hear the faint sound of music, something soft and bluesy that drifted across the yard. James was probably having a much more normal evening than I was, probably not questioning every decision he'd made in the last 5 years. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of dogs barking. Not just 1 or 2 dogs, what sounded like an entire pack. I stumbled to the window and saw James in his side yard, surrounded by at least 6 dogs of various sizes and breeds, all of them clearly adoring him. He was throwing a tennis ball, and they were racing after it with the kind of enthusiasm I'd forgotten existed in the world. One of the dogs, a golden retriever with a slight limp, broke away from the group and wandered over to my property line. James followed, jogging across the yard in worn jeans and a t-shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide his impressive physique. "Sorry about the noise," he called out when he saw me at the window. "These guys have a lot of energy in the morning." I opened the window, grateful that I'd at least put on a decent robe. "Don't apologize. It's nice to hear happy sounds." The golden retriever had found a stick in my yard and was proudly carrying it back to James. He scratched behind the dog's ears with the kind of automatic affection that spoke of years of practice. "This is Buddy," he said, introducing the golden retriever. "He's one of my permanent residents. Someone abandoned him at the clinic 2 years ago with a broken leg that didn't heal quite right, and I couldn't bring myself to let him go to a shelter." My heart melted a little. "You kept him?" "I kept all of them," he admitted with a slightly embarrassed grin. "I'm what you might call a soft touch when it comes to animals that need homes." As if to prove his point, a tiny terrier mix with 3 legs hopped over and began yapping at the golden retriever, clearly demanding attention. James scooped up the smaller dog with practiced ease. "And this little troublemaker is Penny. She likes to think she's in charge around here." "How many do you have?" I asked, genuinely curious now. 6 at the moment, though that number tends to fluctuate depending on who needs rescuing. He looked slightly sheepish. "I know it sounds crazy, but..." "It doesn't sound crazy at all," I interrupted. "It sounds wonderful." And I meant it. There was something incredibly attractive about a man who cared so much about helpless creatures that he'd fill his house with them. It was the complete opposite of Marcus, who'd complained when I wanted to get a houseplant because it would require too much responsibility. "Would you like to meet them properly?" James asked. I was about to make coffee anyway. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a bad idea. I was emotionally vulnerable. He was impossibly charming, and I had absolutely no business getting involved with anyone right now. But the dogs were already winning me over, and the promise of good coffee was more tempting than it should have been. "Give me 5 minutes to get dressed," I heard myself saying. James's house was the perfect reflection of its owner. Comfortable, warm, and slightly chaotic in the best possible way. Dog toys were scattered across the hardwood floors, and every piece of furniture seemed to have at least one furry occupant. The kitchen smelled like coffee and bacon, and there were medical journals stacked on the counter next to a container of dog treats. "Sorry about the mess," he said. clearing dog hair off a chair for me. 6 dogs means constant chaos. I love it, I said honestly. It feels like a real home. He paused in the middle of pouring coffee, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What does your home in New York feel like? The question caught me off guard. Empty, I said before I could stop myself. Clean and organized and completely empty. He handed me a mug of coffee that was absolutely perfect, strong but not bitter, with just a hint of something that might have been vanilla. Is that why you're here? Because of the emptiness? I took a sip of coffee and considered how much to tell him. There was something about James that made me want to confess everything. The cheating, the job I was probably going to lose, the complete mess my life had become. But we just met, and he was being kind to a neighbor, not offering to be my therapist. Among other things, I said carefully. He nodded like he understood the need for privacy. Well, for what it's worth, I think Millbrook is a pretty good place to figure things out. It's hard to stay stressed when you're surrounded by this much peace and quiet. As if on cue, Penny the 3-legged terrier began barking at a squirrel outside the window, which set off all the other dogs in a cacophony of howls and yaps. James and I looked at each other and burst into laughter. Okay. Maybe not completely peaceful, he admitted. I spent the next hour being thoroughly charmed by James and his menagerie. Each dog had a story. Buddy with his broken leg, Penny who'd been hit by a car, Max the German Shepherd who'd been abused and still flinched at sudden movements, Luna the black lab mix who'd been found as a puppy in a box by the highway. James told each story with a mixture of anger at human cruelty and deep affection for his charges. You're like a one-man rescue operation, I said, watching him give Max some kind of medication disguised in a treat. My ex-wife used to say I cared more about animals than people, he said, and there was something in his voice that made me look at him more closely. Ex-wife. So there was a story there, just like I'd suspected. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I said carefully. Animals are usually more honest than people. That's exactly what I told her. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. She didn't see it that way. How long have you been divorced? 2 years next month. He scratched behind Buddy's ears absently. She wanted me to sell the practice and move to Atlanta, join her father's corporate veterinary group. Make real money, she said. Live like civilized people. But you didn't want that. I couldn't do that. This clinic, these animals, this community, it's who I am. I can't pretend to be someone else just to make more money or live in a bigger house. He looked at me directly then. I'm guessing you understand something about that. I did understand, more than he knew. My entire life in New York had been about pretending to be someone else, someone harder, more ambitious, more willing to compromise my values for success. I'd been so busy becoming the person I thought I should be that I'd forgotten who I actually was. I'm starting to, I said quietly. We were interrupted by a knock at the front door, followed immediately by it opening without waiting for an answer. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and a concerned expression bustled into the kitchen. James Morrison, you didn't tell me Charlotte was here for coffee, she scolded, though her tone was affectionate. I would have brought muffins. Aunt Martha. Meet Charlotte Reed, James said with obvious fondness. Charlotte, this is the famous Martha who made your dinner last night. Martha immediately enveloped me in a hug that smelled like flour and vanilla. Oh, honey, you look just like your grandmother when she was your age. Same beautiful eyes, same stubborn chin. Thank you, I said, touched by the comparison. And thank you for the casserole. It was incredible. Just doing what neighbors do, Martha said, waving off my thanks. Now, what are your plans while you're in town? Because we could certainly use some help with the summer festival if you're interested. I had absolutely no plans beyond hiding from my problems and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. But saying that seemed pathetic. I'm not sure how long I'll be staying. Well, however long it is. We're glad to have you, Martha said firmly. This town needs more young people. All our children move away to the big cities and forget where they came from. There was something pointed in the way she looked at me when she said it, like she knew exactly why I was really here. Small towns probably didn't have many secrets, and a fancy car with New York plates showing up at Mrs. Henderson's cottage was probably big news. I should let you two get back to your morning, I said, standing up. Thank you for the coffee, James, and for letting me meet your pack. Anytime, he said, walking me to the door. Really, they could use more socialization, and I could use the company. As I walked back to my cottage, I could feel Martha's eyes on me through the kitchen window. I had a feeling that my presence in Millbrook was about to become the subject of considerable local interest. The rest of the week passed in a strange, peaceful rhythm. I slept late, something I hadn't done in years. I read books from my grandmother's extensive collection. I sat on the porch swing and watched the world go by at a pace that would have driven me crazy a month ago, but now felt almost therapeutic. James and I developed an easy routine of morning coffee in his kitchen, surrounded by his dogs. He was incredibly easy to talk to, funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in hearing about my life in New York. I found myself telling him stories about my job, my friends, even about Marcus, though I edited out the more painful details. So you convinced people to buy expensive face cream by making them feel insecure about their appearance? He asked one morning, his tone carefully neutral. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible, I said, cringing at my own career description. I'm not judging. I'm just trying to understand. Did you enjoy it? I thought about it seriously. I was good at it, and I liked being good at something, liked the recognition and the money and the success. But enjoy it? I shook my head. I don't think I've actually enjoyed my job in years. So why did you stay? Because that's what you do. You find something you're good at, and you stick with it. And you work your way up until you have the life you're supposed to want. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out the life I was supposed to want wasn't actually the life I wanted. What kind of life do you want? The question hung in the air between us. I realized I had absolutely no idea how to answer it. For so long, My wants had been dictated by external expectations. The right job, the right apartment, the right boyfriend, the right clothes, the right everything. I'd never stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted. I have no idea, I admitted. That's the most terrifying part of all this. I'm 32 years old, and I have no idea what would actually make me happy. James was quiet for a moment, absently petting Luna, who had claimed his lap. "You know what I think?" he said finally. "I think you're braver than you realize. It takes courage to walk away from a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty on the inside." "I didn't walk away," I corrected. "I ran away." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you made a choice to prioritize your happiness over other people's expectations." "That's not running away. That's running towards something better." I wanted to believe him, but the practical side of my brain kept intruding. I had rent to pay, bills to cover, a career to salvage. I couldn't hide in Millbrook forever, playing house with my grandmother's cottage and developing inconvenient feelings for my veterinarian neighbor. "What about you?" I asked, changing the subject before I could say something embarrassing. "Did you always want to be a veterinarian?" "Always," he said without hesitation. "Even when I was 5 years old and everyone expected me to take over my father's insurance business. I used to sneak injured animals into my bedroom and try to nurse them back to health with bandages stolen from my mother's medicine cabinet." "Did your parents support your choice?" His expression darkened slightly. "My father thought it was a waste of my potential. He couldn't understand why I'd want to spend my life taking care of animals when I could be making real money in business. He barely spoke to me for the first 2 years after I opened the clinic. And now he's proud, I think." It took him a while to understand that success doesn't always look the way you expect it to. He smiled. "My mother loves telling people her son is a doctor, even if I'm not the kind of doctor she originally had in mind." I could picture it, a younger James fighting for his dreams against family expectations. Just like I was doing now, but with a lot more courage and clarity. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life over what was expected?" "Never," he said firmly. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." The certainty in his voice made something twist in my chest. I envied that kind of confidence, that sense of being exactly where you belonged. I'd never felt that way about anything in my entire life. That afternoon, I was reading on the porch when a sleek black sedan pulled into my driveway. My heart sank when I recognized the driver, Richard Peterson, one of the senior partners at my firm and Marcus's mentor. This couldn't be good. Richard climbed out of the car, looking like he'd stepped directly from a boardroom, his expensive suit completely out of place against the cottage's casual charm. His expression was all business as he approached the porch. "Charlotte," he said with a tight smile, "you're a difficult woman to track down." "Richard, what are you doing here?" "May I come in? We need to discuss your future with the firm." Every instinct told me to send him away, but curiosity won out. I led him into the cottage, watching as he took in the dated decor and cozy atmosphere with barely concealed distaste. "Charming place," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Very rustic." It was my grandmother's, I said simply. Can I offer you coffee? I can't stay long. He remained standing, clearly uncomfortable with the cottage's homey atmosphere. Charlotte, I'll be direct. Marcus told me about your disagreement. Is that what he's calling it? A disagreement? Richard's expression didn't change. Personal relationships aside, you're one of our most valuable employees. The Morrison campaign you developed brought in over $2 million in revenue. We can't afford to lose talent like that. What exactly are you offering? A promotion, senior account director, your own team, a 20% salary increase, and a guarantee that you and Marcus won't have to work directly together. It was a good offer, a great offer, actually. Everything I would have wanted 6 months ago was being handed to me on a silver platter. So why did the thought of going back to New York make me feel physically sick? I need time to think about it, I said. Of course. But Charlotte, opportunities like this don't come along often, and small-town life. He glanced around the cottage dismissively. It's fine for a vacation, but you're too talented to waste away in a place like this. After he left, I sat on the porch swing, feeling more confused than ever. Richard was right. I was too educated, too experienced, too ambitious to hide out in Millbrook forever. But the thought of returning to that world, even with a promotion and more money, filled me with dread. I was still sitting there when James came home from work, his truck pulling into his driveway just as the sun was setting. He waved when he saw me, and I found myself walking over without conscious decision. "You look like you've had a rough day," he said, studying my face with those perceptive brown eyes. "Someone from my old job came to see me," I said. "They offered me a promotion, senior account director, my own team, a big salary increase." "That's wonderful," he said, but something in his expression suggested he didn't think it was wonderful at all. "Congratulations. I haven't accepted it yet." "Why not?" I struggled to find the words. "Because the thought of going back makes me feel like I can't breathe. Because I'm different here, happier here. And I don't know if I can go back to being the person I was before." "Then don't," he said simply. "It's not that easy. I have responsibilities, bills, a career I've spent 10 years building. And you also have a choice," he said quietly. "You can go back to New York and be successful and miserable. Or you can stay here and figure out what actually makes you happy. What if I stay here and fail? What if I can't make it work? What if you go back and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been?" That night, I called my best friend Sarah in New York, hoping she could provide some clarity. Instead, she confirmed my worst fears. "Charlotte, you have to take that promotion," she said without hesitation. "Do you know how many people would kill for an opportunity like that? You can't throw away your entire career for some small-town fantasy." "It's not a fantasy. I'm actually happy here." "You're hiding," she said bluntly. "You're hurt and embarrassed about Marcus, and you're running away instead of dealing with your problems. But this isn't real life. Charlie, real life is in New York, with your career and your friends and your future. What if I don't want that future anymore? then you're having some kind of breakdown, and you need to come home so we can get you help. The conversation left me feeling more isolated than ever. According to everyone who knew me, choosing happiness over success was a sign of mental instability. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown. But if this was a breakdown, why did I feel more like myself than I had in years? The next morning, I found James in his clinic, treating a cat with a broken paw. He looked up when I knocked on the doorframe, his face lighting up with a smile that made my heart skip. "Morning," he said, carefully wrapping the cat's paw in a tiny bandage. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. I watched him work, marveling at the gentleness of his large hands as he secured the bandage. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When your ex-wife wanted you to move to Atlanta to join her father's practice, was it hard to say no, even though you knew it was the wrong choice?" He finished with the cat and placed it gently in a carrier before answering. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," he said quietly. "I loved her, or I thought I did. And the practical part of me knew she was probably right. I could have made more money, had an easier life, been what she wanted me to be. But you didn't. I couldn't. Because I realized that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself for them. And if someone truly loves you, they won't ask you to become someone else to make them happy." His words hit me like a physical blow. That was exactly what Marcus had asked of me, wasn't it? To become harder, more ruthless, more willing to compromise my values for success. And I'd been so desperate to keep him happy that I'd lost sight of who I actually was. "I think I've been living the wrong life for a very long time," I said quietly. "So change it," he said, stepping closer. "It's never too late to choose differently." We were standing very close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with the clean scent of soap, close enough that when he reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, I felt it in every nerve ending. "Charlotte," he said softly, and the way he said my name made my knees weak. I knew I should step back, should maintain some kind of boundaries, should protect both of us from the inevitable complications. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my eyes closing as his thumb traced along my cheekbone. "This is probably a bad idea," I whispered. "Probably." He agreed, but he didn't move away. "I'm not staying. I can't stay. My whole life is in New York." "I know," he said, and there was sadness in his voice that made my chest ache. But despite all the logical reasons why we shouldn't, when he leaned down and kissed me, I didn't pull away. His lips were soft and warm and perfect, and for the first time in months, everything else faded away except this moment, this feeling, this man who made me feel like I might actually deserve to be happy. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. James rested his forehead against mine, his hands still cupping my face. "I should probably mention," he said with a slightly shaky laugh, "that I'm falling in love with you." My heart stopped. "James, I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for 2 weeks. I know you're probably going back to New York. But I needed you to know." I wanted to tell him I was falling in love with him too. I wanted to say that the thought of leaving him made me feel like I was drowning. Instead, I stepped back, putting distance between us before I could do something even more stupid than I already had. I should go, I said, hating the hurt that flashed across his face. Charlotte, wait. But I was already walking away, my heart breaking with every step. That evening, I called Richard and told him I needed another week to make my decision. He wasn't happy, but he agreed to hold the position open. Then I sat on my porch swing and watched the lights come on in James's house, torturing myself with thoughts of what might have been if my life were different, if I were braver, if I were the kind of person who could choose love over logic. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number with a local area code. Charlotte, this is Dr. Patricia Wells from Millbrook General Hospital. I'm calling about James Morrison. My blood turned to ice. What about him? He's been in an accident. A car hit him while he was crossing Main Street. He's asking for you. The next few hours passed in a blur of hospital waiting rooms and fluorescent lighting and the antiseptic smell that made me want to vomit. James had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a badly sprained ankle. But he was going to be okay. When they finally let me see him, he looked pale and bruised but still managed to smile when he saw me. You came, he said, his voice slightly slurred from the pain medication. Of course I came. I took his hand carefully, mindful of the IV line. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a car, he said with a weak attempt at humor. But better now that you're here. Don't talk. You need to rest. Charlotte, about this morning, we don't need to discuss that now. Yes, we do. He squeezed my hand. I meant what I said. I'm in love with you. And I know that scares you. And I know it complicates everything. But I needed you to know. Tears were streaming down my face before I could stop them. James, you don't understand. I can't. You can, he said firmly. Whatever you're afraid of, whatever's holding you back, you can choose differently. You can choose to be happy. What if I choose wrong? What if I stay here and ruin both our lives? What if you don't? A nurse came in then, ending our conversation. But James's words echoed in my head as I drove home through the empty streets of Millbrook. What if I don't? What if, for once in my life, I chose what I wanted instead of what I thought I should want? What if I chose love over logic, happiness over success, James over everything I thought I needed? The cottage felt different when I walked in, like it was waiting for me to make a decision. I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table and tried to imagine my life in New York, the promotion, the corner office, the apartment I'd share with new roommates since Marcus and I were over. It would be successful and safe and completely empty. Then I tried to imagine staying in Millbrook, helping James with his practice, maybe starting something of my own, being part of a community that actually cared about each other. It would be uncertain and scary and absolutely terrifying. It would also be real. I spent the next 3 days at the hospital, helping James navigate the aftermath of his accident. His dogs needed to be fed and walked. His patients needed to be rescheduled, and his practice needed someone to handle the basics while he recovered. I found myself talking to worried pet owners, coordinating with the animal hospital in the next town for emergency cases, and generally keeping his life running. It felt good. It felt useful and important, and completely different from manipulating people into buying products they didn't need. I was helping instead of exploiting, caring instead of calculating, on the fourth day. As I was updating James's appointment book, Martha appeared in the clinic doorway with a knowing smile. "You're a natural at this," she said, watching me organize the supply closet. "I'm just helping out until he's back on his feet." She gave me a look that suggested she saw right through me. "You know, we've been needing someone to coordinate the town's social services. Someone with organizational skills and experience managing people. It doesn't pay much, but it's meaningful work." I paused in my organizing. "What kind of social services?" "Food bank coordination, helping seniors with medical appointments, organizing community events, connecting people with resources they need. Basic stuff, but important. The kind of work that actually makes a difference in people's lives." It sounded nothing like my high-powered marketing career. It also sounded like exactly the kind of work that might actually matter. "I'll think about it," I said carefully. "You do that?" Martha said with a satisfied smile. "And honey, James is one of the good ones. Don't let fear keep you from something real." That evening, I sat beside James's hospital bed and watched him sleep. The bruises were fading, and he looked more like himself, though still fragile in a way that made my chest tight with protective feelings I'd never experienced before. "You're staring," he said without opening his eyes. "You're supposed to be sleeping." "Hard to sleep when I can feel you thinking so loudly." He opened his eyes and looked at me seriously. "What's going on in that complicated brain of yours?" "Martha offered me a job." "She did?" He sat up straighter, wincing slightly. "What kind of job?" I told him about the social services coordinator position, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think?" he asked finally. "I think it would be a massive pay cut, a complete career change, and probably professional suicide. And I think it might be exactly what I need." He smiled then, the kind of smile that lit up his entire face. "So you're staying?" "I don't know. Maybe. I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of making the wrong choice. Of disappointing people. Of not being good enough for this kind of life. Of falling in love with you and having it not work out and being left with nothing." "Charlotte." He reached for my hand. "What if it does work out? What if you're exactly good enough? What if falling in love with me is the best decision you ever make?" I looked at this man who'd shown me more kindness in 3 weeks than I'd experienced in years of relationships and career success. Who cared more about helping animals than making money? Who'd rather live authentically in a small town than compromise his values for wealth and status? Who looked at me like I was worth choosing, worth loving, worth building a life with? "I love you too," I said quietly. "I've been fighting it for weeks, but I love you too." His smile was brilliant. "So what are we going to do about it?" "I have no idea, but I want to find out." That night, I called Richard and declined the promotion. Then I called Martha and accepted her job offer. Finally, I called my landlord in New York and gave him notice on my apartment. With each phone call, I felt lighter, like I was shedding a skin that had never quite fit. By the time I finished, I was crying, but they were tears of relief rather than fear. I was choosing happiness. I was choosing love. I was choosing a life that felt real and meaningful and completely uncertain. I was choosing James and Millbrook, and the possibility that sometimes the life you think you want isn't nearly as important as the life that actually makes you happy. 6 months later, I was coordinating the annual Millbrook Christmas Festival when James appeared at my new office, a converted storefront on Main Street that served as the community resource center, with coffee and the kind of smile that still made my heart skip. "How's the festival planning going?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Surprisingly well. We've got vendors lined up. The high school band is performing. And Mrs. Martinez is organizing a cookie exchange that I'm pretty sure is going to be the highlight of the whole event." "And how are you doing?" he asked, studying my face with the careful attention he usually reserved for his animal patients. "I'm good," I said, and realized I meant it completely. Really good. It had taken some adjusting, living on a fraction of my former salary, learning to navigate small-town politics, figuring out how to be useful in a completely different way. But every day felt meaningful in a way my old job never had. I was helping people connect with resources they needed, organizing events that brought the community together, making a difference in individual lives rather than corporate bottom lines. And I was with James. We'd moved in together 2 months ago, officially combining his pack of rescue dogs with my growing collection of houseplants in a chaos of fur and flowers that felt like home. We talked about marriage sometimes, about the future, about the veterinary clinic expansion he was planning and the community garden I wanted to start. "I have something to tell you," he said, his expression turning serious. My heart skipped for a different reason. "What?" "I got a call from Dr. Anderson in Atlanta, the one who runs that corporate veterinary group my ex-wife's father owns." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "And?" "They want to offer me a position, head of their rural outreach program. It would mean overseeing clinics in small towns across the Southeast, helping them modernize and expand. The salary would be..." He shook his head. "Let's just say it would be more money than I've ever imagined making." My chest felt tight. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. It is. It would be based in Atlanta, but I'd travel constantly. It would mean leaving Millbrook, selling the clinic, finding new homes for the dogs who can't travel. He paused. "It would mean asking you to leave too, just when you found your place here." I stared at him, my mind racing. After everything we'd both sacrificed to build this life, after all the careful choices we'd made to prioritize happiness over money and status, was he really considering throwing it all away? "What did you tell them?" I asked quietly. "I told them I'd think about it." He leaned forward, taking my hands. "Charlotte, this could change everything for us. We could have the life we thought we wanted, money, prestige, opportunities neither of us dreamed of." I thought we already had the life we wanted. We do. But this could be even better. I pulled my hands away, standing up and moving to the window that looked out over Main Street. Millbrook's Christmas decorations were going up, and I could see Martha directing a group of volunteers hanging garland on the streetlights. Mrs. Martinez was setting up her hot chocolate stand outside the bakery. James's clinic was visible down the street, and I could see his assistant handling the afternoon appointments. This was our life. This quiet, meaningful, happy life we'd built together. And he was willing to consider giving it up for money and prestige. The same things I'd walked away from to find him. James, I said without turning around. Do you remember what you told me about loving someone and losing yourself for them? There was a long silence behind me. When I finally turned around, he was staring at his hands, his face pale. You think I'm asking you to lose yourself for me, aren't you? No. I'm asking if you want to build something bigger together. If you want more than just this small town and these small dreams. These aren't small dreams, I said, my voice rising. This life we've built, it's everything I never knew I wanted. It's real and meaningful and good. Why isn't that enough? Because we could have more, he said, standing up and moving toward me. Charlotte, I love what we have here, but I also love you enough to want to give you everything. The best opportunities, the most options, the biggest possible life. What if I don't want the biggest possible life? What if I want this life with you, exactly as it is? We stared at each other across my small office, and I felt something fracturing between us. The same fundamental difference that had broken up so many couples before us. One person's ambition running headlong into another person's contentment. I need time to think, he said finally. So do I. After he left, I sat in my office and stared at the Christmas festival planning documents scattered across my desk. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance to move to Atlanta, to have more money and better opportunities. But that was before I'd learned the difference between a successful life and a happy one. Was I being selfish? Asking James to stay in Millbrook when he could have so much more? Or was he being selfish? Asking me to give up the life I'd finally found to chase the same kind of success we'd both already walked away from? That evening, I walked over to James's house, our house, and found him in the backyard with his dogs. He was throwing a tennis ball for Buddy while the others played around him, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then he saw me, and the careful distance in his expression reminded me that nothing was normal anymore. We need to talk, I said. I know. He called the dogs inside and we sat on the back porch, the space between us feeling vast despite the small bench. I've been thinking about what you said, I began. About wanting to give me everything, the biggest possible life. And, James, I had the biggest possible life. I had the corner office and the designer clothes and the 6-figure salary and the boyfriend who looked perfect on paper. And I was miserable every single day. This is different. We'd be together. We'd be helping animals on a larger scale, making a real difference. We're already making a real difference, I interrupted. Right here, with these animals, in this community. Why isn't that enough? Because I want more for us. I want to know we're living up to our potential. And what if our potential isn't about money or prestige? What if our potential is about being happy and helping people and building a life that actually matters to us? He was quiet for a long moment, absently petting Luna, who had curled up between us. "What if we try it for a year?" he said finally. "1 year in Atlanta, and if we hate it, we come back?" You know it doesn't work that way. Once you take a job like that, you can't just walk away. "And what about the clinic? What about your dogs? What about the life we've built here? We can build a new life." "I don't want a new life," I said, my voice breaking. "I want this life. I want the life where you rescue broken animals, and I help connect people with resources they need, and we're part of a community that actually cares about each other. I want the life where we're happy, and I want the life where we reach our full potential together." We stared at each other, and I realized we were at an impasse. He saw Atlanta as an opportunity to grow together. I saw it as a betrayal of everything we'd chosen to build. He thought I was limiting myself. I thought he was destroying what we had for something that might not even exist. "I can't do it," I said quietly. "I can't go back to that world, even with you. I worked too hard to find myself to lose myself again. And I can't turn down this opportunity," he said. "I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." The silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we couldn't say, all the compromises neither of us was willing to make. "So what does that mean for us?" I asked finally. "I don't know," he said, and his voice was as broken as mine. That night, we lay in bed together but didn't touch, both of us staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how two people who loved each other so much could want such completely different things. The next morning, James was gone when I woke up. There was a note on the kitchen table saying he'd gone to Atlanta for a few days to see the practice, to talk to the partners, to figure out what the job would actually entail. He'd be back by the weekend, and we'd talk then. I spent the week throwing myself into festival planning, trying not to think about the empty house or the dogs who kept looking for James or the very real possibility that our relationship was ending before it had really begun. Martha found me in my office on Thursday afternoon, stress-eating cookies and reorganizing vendor contracts for the third time. "Honey, you look like hell," she said with her typical bluntness. "Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear." "Where's James? I haven't seen him at the clinic all week." I told her about Atlanta, about the job offer, about our fight. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making small noises of disapproval. "That boy," she said when I finished. "I thought we'd raised him better than that." "He's not wrong," I said quietly. "Maybe I am holding him back. Maybe he could do more good with a bigger practice, more resources, more opportunities. And maybe you could do more good back in New York with that promotion they offered you," Martha said pointedly. "But doing more good isn't the same as being happier, and being happy isn't selfish. Charlotte, it's necessary. What if he takes the job? Then he takes the job, and you'll have to decide if you love him enough to follow him, or if you love yourself enough to stay. How do I know which is the right choice?" Martha was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at Main Street. When my husband got offered a job in Chicago 40 years ago, I was terrified. This was our home, our life, our community. But I loved him. So I was ready to pack up and follow him anywhere. What happened? He turned it down, said he'd rather build a good life with me in a place we loved than chase after something bigger in a place where we'd be strangers. She smiled sadly. Best decision we ever made. We had 43 happy years together before he passed. But what if James doesn't turn it down? Then he's not the man I thought he was. And honey, if that's the case, you're better off without him. Friday came and went without word from James. Saturday morning, I was setting up for the Christmas festival when his truck pulled into the clinic parking lot. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to focus on hanging the banner for the cookie exchange rather than running over to him like I wanted to. He found me an hour later, standing next to the hot chocolate booth and pretending to supervise while Martha's volunteers handled everything perfectly without me. "Charlotte," he said, and something in his voice made me look at him sharply. He looked terrible, exhausted, conflicted, like he hadn't slept in days. But there was also something resolved in his expression, like he'd made a decision. "How was Atlanta?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Eye-opening," he said. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" We walked to the clinic in silence, my mind racing through possibilities. He was going to take the job. He was going to ask me to come with him. He was going to end things between us. He was going to... "I turned it down," he said as soon as we were inside. I stared at him. "What?" "The job in Atlanta. I turned it down." "Why?" He sat down heavily in one of the waiting room chairs, running his hands through his hair. "Because you were right. Because I spent 3 days in boardrooms talking about efficiency and profit margins and market expansion, and all I could think about was Buddy limping around the yard and Mrs. Peterson's cat who needs insulin twice a day and the way you look when you're organizing one of your community events." "James, let me finish." He looked up at me, his eyes serious. I realized I was making the same mistake my ex-wife made. I was so focused on what we could have that I stopped appreciating what we do have. And what we have is pretty incredible. Relief flooded through me, so intense I had to sit down. "Are you sure? You're not going to regret it?" "I'm sure. Charlotte, I've been successful in corporate terms before. I know what that life looks like. And it's not us. This is us, this clinic, this town, these animals who need us. You organizing community events, and me fixing broken paws, and both of us going home together every night to our chaotic house full of rescue dogs. And you're okay with that? With staying small?" "We're not staying small," he said firmly. "We're staying true to who we are. And there's nothing small about that." I launched myself at him then, not caring that we were in his waiting room or that anyone could walk in. He caught me easily, holding me tight against his chest while I cried with relief. "I love you," I said against his neck. "I love you so much, and I was so scared I was going to lose you." "You're not going to lose me," he said, pulling back to look at me. "I'm exactly where I want to be. Even though it means less money, fewer opportunities, a smaller life by everyone else's standards. Especially because of that," he said. Charlotte, I spent 3 days in Atlanta, and you know what I missed most? Not the prestige or the salary or the impressive title. I missed coming home to you. I missed our morning coffee with the dogs fighting for lap space. I missed feeling like what I do actually matters to the people and animals I serve. I missed you too, I said. So much. Good, he said with a grin. Because I have a proposal for you. My heart stopped. What kind of proposal? The business kind, he said quickly, then laughed at my expression. Though now that I think about it, the other kind might be coming soon too. James Morrison, you are terrible at romantic timing. I'm working on it. But first, the business proposal. He took my hands. What would you think about expanding your social services work? Maybe adding some basic veterinary outreach, low-cost clinics for people who can't afford regular vet bills, educational programs about animal care, that kind of thing? You want to work together? I want to build something together. Something that's ours, that reflects our values, that makes a difference in this community we both love. It was perfect. It was exactly what I'd never known I wanted. A partnership that was both personal and professional. A way to combine our skills and passions into something meaningful. Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes to all of it. Even the part about the other kind of proposal coming soon. Especially that part. He kissed me then. Right there in the clinic waiting room with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and the sound of the Christmas festival drifting in from the street. It was perfect and imperfect and absolutely right. When we finally broke apart, I could hear Martha's voice outside, probably wondering where we'd disappeared to during the festival setup. We should get back, I said reluctantly. In a minute. He cupped my face in his hands. I need you to know something. Choosing this life, choosing you, choosing us, it's not settling. It's not giving up on bigger dreams. It's recognizing that the biggest dream of all is being truly happy with someone you love. I know, I said. It took me a while to figure that out, but I know. And you're happy? Really happy? I looked around the clinic where James spent his days caring for animals who needed him. I thought about my office down the street where I spent my days helping people connect with resources and support. I thought about our chaotic house full of rescue dogs and my growing collection of houseplants, and the community that had welcomed me with open arms. I thought about morning coffee with James, afternoon walks with the dogs, evening conversations on the porch swing. I thought about feeling useful and valued and genuinely cared for. I'm happier than I ever thought possible, I said honestly. Good, he said, kissing me again. Because this is just the beginning. 1 year later, I stood in the same clinic where James had first told me he loved me, wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers from our garden. The space had been transformed with flowers and candles, filled with what felt like the entire population of Millbrook, plus a few friends who'd made the trip from New York. Sarah was there, still convinced I'd lost my mind, but supportive nonetheless. My parents had flown in from California, initially horrified that I was marrying a small-town veterinarian instead of a Manhattan executive, but won over completely by James's easy charm and obvious devotion to me. Even Marcus had sent a wedding gift, An expensive crystal vase that was completely wrong for our casual lifestyle, but which we'd graciously accepted and immediately donated to the church auction. As I walked down the makeshift aisle between the exam tables, I caught sight of James waiting for me at the front of the room, flanked by 6 dogs in matching bow ties who were serving as his groomsmen. His face lit up when he saw me, and I felt that same flutter in my chest that I'd experienced the first time he'd smiled at me. "Hi," he said softly when I reached him. "Hi yourself," I whispered back. The ceremony was perfect in its imperfection. Buddy barked during the vows. Penny tried to steal the ring, and Mrs. Martinez cried so loudly during the kiss that she drowned out the applause. It was chaotic and wonderful and exactly right for us. Afterward, during the reception in Martha's backyard, I found myself standing at the edge of the party, watching our friends and neighbors celebrate with genuine joy. James appeared beside me, slipping his arm around my waist. "Any regrets?" he asked, nodding toward Sarah, who was deep in conversation with Martha about the differences between city and small-town life. "Only one," I said. His face fell slightly. "What?" "I regret that it took me so long to find you, that I wasted so many years thinking I knew what I wanted when what I actually wanted was right here waiting for me." His smile was brilliant. "Well, Mrs. Morrison, you're here now. That's all that matters, Mrs. Morrison. I was going to have to get used to that, but I liked the sound of it. I liked being part of something bigger than myself, being half of a partnership that was about building rather than competing." "So what's next for us?" I asked. "Tomorrow, we start that low-cost clinic program we've been planning. Next month, we open the community garden behind your office. Next year, maybe we expand the program to other small towns in the region. And after that, we keep building this life we love, one day at a time, one rescued animal at a time, one community connection at a time." I leaned into him, watching our wedding guests mingle and laugh and celebrate. "It's funny," I said. "A year and a half ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to a veterinarian in a town of 3,000 people, living in a house full of rescue dogs and running community outreach programs, I would have thought they were describing someone else's life. And now I can't imagine any other life making me this happy." James turned me in his arms, his hands settling on my waist. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think sometimes the life you never planned is exactly the life you were meant to live." As if summoned by his words, Buddy trotted over and sat down next to us, his tail wagging as he looked up expectantly. James laughed and reached down to scratch behind his ears. "And sometimes," I added, watching my husband, love on the dog who'd brought us together that first morning. "The family you never expected is exactly the family you needed." Looking back now, I can see that every choice that led me to Millbrook was really a choice to prioritize my happiness over everyone else's expectations. Leaving Marcus, walking away from my job, staying in my grandmother's cottage, falling in love with James, building a life that looked nothing like what I'd planned. Each decision was a small act of rebellion against the idea that success and happiness were the same thing. They're not the same thing. Success is about meeting external standards, checking boxes, achieving goals that other people set for you. Happiness is about knowing yourself well enough to choose what actually fulfills you. Even when that choice looks crazy to everyone else, I chose happiness. I chose love. I chose a life that felt real and meaningful and completely mine. And in the end, that made all the difference.